Hey friends, this is Mark Suroviec, host of the Workplace Solutions podcast, inviting you to discover the joy of work. All right, back for part 2. How you? It's weird asking you how you're feeling. It's only been 3 minutes since we recorded part 1. Good still, I hope.
We're doing well.
Your dog has been very calm while we've been recording. I don't want to jinx anything, so...
He's been doing pretty good. He's pretty chill. He's 11 these days, so...
I am here with Dr. Chris Auger, retired Navy SEAL and team and leadership coach. So, Chris, let's kick it off with an icebreaker. I know that from some of our conversations about movies that certain things about action movies drive you crazy. So what is a action movie cliche as a former military or as a retired military person you just go, ugh, that just drives you batty whenever you see it in an action movie?
I think it's when people talk about clips.
Okay.
For weapons.
Okay.
It's a magazine. Clips are a little band of metal that hold bullets together. The actual magazine is a housing for bullets or rounds that then go into the weapon so that it can be used. You know, when people talk about the clip, it's like, okay, so you just told me you know absolutely nothing about the weapon that you're about to break bad with. So it's just like, miss.
I thought you were going to say unlimited bullets, but...
Well, there is that too. So it's like you're watching the guy and there's like 40 rounds later, you're like, okay, so when did he reload again?
You're running through John Wick style and like, I did not know that 9mm carried 95 rounds.
Although I like the John Wick series. It's action packed.
It's a video game.
Pretty much.
It's a video game. Oh man. I remember on my birthday, a friend of mine and I do a birthday crawl where we go around town and try to get a bunch of free stuff for our birthday. And you can go to the movies and get a free movie. So we went and saw John Wick 3, I think it was, and I had never seen any of them before. I was just like, wow. And there was 2 theaters in town, so I went and got a second movie and saw Toy Story 4, which had way less gun battles than John Wick.
True.
But really good movie. All right, I'm gonna go with mine as in I had it. Oh, the silencer is just the chirp sound.
Right.
The bloop. No, a something that suppresses gunfire, makes it like 20 decibels lower. It's not much.
It makes it significant lower.
Okay, but not so much that you don't hear it in the next room.
Correct.
Okay. So we are here with Dr. Chris Auger talking about self-awareness, part 2. And we are going to start with the question, how do we know how self-aware we are?
I think it actually has to start in your heart and a willingness to ask people that know you, care about you, and want to help you become better. Mm-hmm. The tough questions, like how do they see you in certain situations? Not necessarily with them, but when they observe you in difficult situations, being able to ask them for feedback, but being open to the feedback and not willing to blame or justify what you did in the feedback. It's like you onboard the feedback, you chew on it, and then you look for either confirmation or denial through other forms of feedback. So it can be through assessments, it can be through people, it can be through loved ones that are associated with you. There's a myriad of ways, and the channels can complement each other or validate one another as well. And in the process of taking that in, then it becomes, okay, so I'm seeing a trend, I'm seeing a pattern. For instance, my wife can say I have low empathy, but I see it across all my assessments. It's a trend. If I choose to ignore it, well, I'm aware, but I'm not doing anything with it. So it's really just a data point. That's not something that's going to be helpful, that if I know it's low. Now, granted, there may be situations in the SEAL community that empathy is going to be low. You're in battle. That isn't the time to have a lot of empathy for the foe.
Yeah.
But to be able to dial it up after the shooting's down or done and understand you just blew in the front door. The bomb maker's sister is sitting there in a corner with 3 kids screaming. It's because they think that they're horrified. So being able to, in that moment when the shooting's done, to dial it up, to escort a female interpreter over to that individual and explain to her where her brother's going, and to calm their fears and to feed them and water them and pay for the damage, and to let her know where her brother's going and how she can communicate with him in the future. You've just flipped the switch on the empathy and dialed it way up, because you and your team just entered the house in a very violent manner, blowing in the front door and doing whatever else needed to be done. Those kids, I mean, seeing it from their eyes and their perspective and how they feel, being able to register that and use that in your next leadership moment is what's key.
Okay. Can you give us an example from the business world then? That's not a, like, most of our listeners probably aren't SEALs, I'm guessing. Yet. I don't know.
I was working with a gentleman recently, and he is very much if he's thinking it, it's coming out of his mouth. And he works in the restaurant industry, high stress, fast food. Every day's chaotic. So if he was thinking it, he was saying it. Unfortunately, his tone of voice, his mannerisms spoke of, are you just stupid, or why are you going to do this? That's how people were receiving his feedback and his input. Now he's learned that he can actually think, pause, ask a question. And in the process of asking that question, he becomes informed about where the other person's at. They feel heard and validated. He gets new information he didn't have before. He then gets to use that. And instead of reacting to a very stressful environment, because what's in us when we're squeezed is going to come out. So if we can train and work on what comes out when we're squeezed in those stressful moments, we can train so that we're not just reacting emotionally, but that we're responding very cognitively. Now, granted, I'm not saying in a life-threatening situation we should try to train ourselves out of reacting appropriately. I'm saying is that in those leadership moments when it's work and it's stressful, we can respond a lot better if we're willing to slow it down a little bit. And just because we're thinking it doesn't mean we need to be saying it or projecting it with our body language and our facial features and everything else. Because 93% of communications is nonverbal. So people are picking up on that. It's like, ooh, wow, okay, you're pushing people back and you're not even moving towards them.
I know we've talked about this idea, the two of us before, just in our chats, of emotional hijack with your amygdala. Can you just give us a brief explanation of what that is and how that plays out?
So if you were to take and draw a line horizontally underneath your nose and go down, that's the part of the brain that receives all input. Your emotional brain is between that line and about your eyebrows. That's the middle brain. That's where your amygdala, if you were to take your fingers and point at your temples, between your two fingers would be two almond-sized pieces of your brain, which is your fight, flight, or fright part of your brain. In other words, if you reach for something that's really hot, you're going to pull away from it in a very reactionary way. It's how we're hardwired. We were hardwired that way by the Lord so that we could actually survive. Now, we can deaden that. There's a movie out there about somebody who climbs mountains without a rope, and they looked at his amygdala and how it lights off, and it doesn't light off. He just doesn't have a fear of doing that. He just plans and visualizes the route, and he goes. Your average person, I mean, it would just look like a bright light bulb underneath the MRI. So it's this idea we have our emotional brain, and it's very reactionary. It's 100 times faster than the prefrontal cortex, which is our upper brain, and that's what we do our thinking from. So emotionally, we react. Cognitively, we respond. So we can train to respond very fast with hours and hours of repetition so that once we sense something, very quickly we process it and then respond accordingly. If you think of like a martial arts expert, they train for thousands and thousands of hours and they go into a conflict or a fight. They sense somebody else's contact with them and pressure. They're not reacting as much as they're actually responding just very, very quickly. But a reactionary response that's reflective, something's flying at your face and you throw your hand up, that's because your protective brain, your emotional brain, has kicked in, and it's going to supersede your thinking brain. Now, imagine if you're at work all day long and you're a pitcher of water and you're just being poured out. Some people are a heavy pour. Those high maintenance people that you're just, wow, you're just sucking the life out of me. And then there's people that give you energy and maybe put a little bit back into your pitcher of water. But for the most part, most people are sleep deprived, not eating well, not exercising, playing well, and maybe not even on a good faith walk. They pretty much start their day out about 2/3 full, no matter how hard they try, unless they're doing those other things to keep and wake up in the morning a full pitcher. So if you're pouring out, by the time you get home and you put down your armor and you walk into your kingdom and you're unprotected, you're unguarded, and all of a sudden somebody who knows you and loves you most hits one of those buttons and you pop off or say or do something. It's literally leaving your mouth and you're reaching for it as it's leaving and hitting their ears. And you're owing a 3-part apology because you've now said or done something that you didn't realize you were saying or doing.
And because also the lip box does not exist and cannot rewind 5 seconds.
Correct. Absolutely. So the idea is that how do you set the stage? I was just talking to somebody about that today. When I said that, he realized that he comes home and for 30 minutes, nobody talks to him. But at Christmas time, his relatives all want to talk to him when he comes home from work. And he's like, just get away from me. I don't want to be around people right now. So my answer to him was, you prepare to go to work in a very, very unique way. Like a great story was a pastor out in California that I was coaching, and basically nobody wanted to be the next victim, so nobody brought him any problems until they were nuclear and couldn't hide him anymore. So I coached him on his EQ and how he could fix that. Now, he would go into work, listen to music, he'd pray, he'd just set himself up for success, show up a little bit earlier, take care of his tasks. He was approachable and available, all those key things to be present for his people. 6 months of that, team was operating on all cylinders. He was having a good time. But now, I was cheating a little bit because we did life outside of that together, like weekends and barbecues and stuff. And I was like, great, how's it going at home? And he just kind of hung his head. And I was just like, what do you do to prepare to be with those that you profess to love the most? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, what do you just told me that you prepare to be with people that you're with most of your life, 8 to 10 hours a day. But how do you prepare to go home to be to avoid the emotional hijack, to be so poured out that we're predisposed to that saying or doing something? And he's like, I don't understand. I was like, let me give a shot at it. I was like, you leave the office on the phone. You answer 3 to 4 calls on the way home. You're driving in traffic, probably receiving some pretty ugly sign language, maybe some people yelling at you, maybe giving a little. It's up to you. We've all been guilty of that.
Because California traffic is known for being peaceful.
Absolutely. So, and you get to the driveway, you pull in, you walk from the car, that 30 seconds. Your boys haven't seen you all day, and you have 2 very high-energy boys, and they're homeschooled. And they jump on you, you growl at them, go off to your office, come out after an hour, and wonder why nobody wants to be around you. And he's like, you got cameras in my house? I was like, no, I've been there, and I understand what's going on. I was like, let me offer this. What would it look like if you put the phone in your backpack in the back seat of the car, listen to music on the way home? Now, he was a prior drummer before becoming a pastor. And he's like, can I listen to AC/DC? I was like, I don't care what you listen to. As long as it's...
Do they have good drums?
Whatever's putting something back in your picture so that you are more of who you were created to be for those around you when you get home. And then once you get home, your boys are going to jump on you. Take some quiet time in the car prior to going in, meditate, pray, do whatever you're going to do with that. But take some time to just pause. Let go of work and leave it at work. Leave the traffic in the traffic. Hit the front door. When they jump on you, drag them over to your bride, hug and kiss her to show them where she's at in the pack. Then take them out to the canyon. Go look for snakes and rabbits and coyotes and whatever else for about 40, 45 minutes. Give your bride that gift of quiet because she hasn't had it all day. Mind you, you have 2 high-energy boys. Come back, help with dinner, help with cleanup, help with homework and bath time, and then take some good quality quiet time with your bride. Yep. Try that for the next 3 weeks and see what happens. Now, mind you, a couple weeks later, she walks up to me and she says, "What did you do to him?" I was like,
in a good way, right?
I wasn't sure. I was just like, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? And she's just like, "I'm not sure yet, but I'll let you know." So the whole idea is that his intentionality, because he was self-aware, he was coming home and doing that. The intentionality of putting something back in the picture prevented him from walking into an ambush, or what he felt was an ambush. It might not have been. It might have been. But he was more prepared to handle it in the moment and to be intentional because of the self-awareness he was putting into application. I'm poured out. It's a rough day. Even being able to come in and say, it was a really hard day today. I just need a few minutes to gather myself, and then I'll take the boys for a walk. Just having that level of self-actualization and self-awareness helped her understand what was going on and not feel like the enemy every time he came home and just didn't want to be around anybody.
That's really good. I think of the transitions that people went through at the beginning of the pandemic where folks used their drive or their commute as part of their mental preparation to and from work. And if all you did was roll out of bed and turn on Zoom, then you came across differently. People could tell the difference. I know.
Sure.
The days where I sat down and turned on the camera not that long after I woke up, it was different than if I drove to work. And I love podcasts and audiobooks, so I would always be learning on the way to work and not having that 20 to 30 minutes of quiet time and learning and slowing things down and betterment. Just it made a difference. So.
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of people, again, back to the idea of being squeezed. When we're squeezed, what comes out? And I think we've all had those Zoom sessions where kids or dogs in the corner, you get squeezed in the middle of it and they're not quite acting the way you need them to act in sound of the microphone and the speakers. And we've all had those moments where something that, that emotional hijack, and it's just like, wow, did I just do that in front of everybody that knows me? And it's like, yeah, it happens.
Okay. What are some resources for folks who want to grow their self-awareness? You mentioned the self-care, which is incredibly important, and getting feedback from others. What are some other things that people can do to grow that self-awareness?
Well, I think it's prudent to take assessments. Whether it's a DISC, a Myers-Briggs, an EQI, a Strength Finders, I say take as many as you can, and they're all data points. They don't define you; they describe you. But being able to take those, find threads that you can see as strengths, and then be willing to see the threads that need some growth. But being able to use that information to ask people for the feedback that is high quality, because now you're giving them something. Hey, I'm curious as to what my empathy is. Or I'm curious to see if I actually listen. Or do I act or do I wait for other people? And it's being able to get that, being able to ask good quality questions and not why questions, because that tends to put people on a defensive. They feel they have to justify and defend that kind of feedback's not great.
Why'd you do this?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, why did you say that? But then somebody has to justify and defend their answer, and it's, help me understand what you saw in this moment. Or how could I be more effective in this moment? Invite them into a dialogue, because that's not pushing them away. That's pulling them in, and you're asking for their feedback and their thoughts and their musings versus, why would you say something like that? I didn't do that. Well, if it's a blind spot, yeah, you probably did. So that's where that kind of feedback comes into play.
I think of when I first started getting deep into the DISC and studying that as an assessment. One of the first things I did was sign my wife up to take the assessment and then ran our comparison report. And it was eye-opening. And then the second thing I did was everyone that my supervisor and everyone that I had a very close relationship with at work, I ran those comparison reports and went, oh, that makes sense. Why X? And it's hilarious if you see Alice and I's comparison report, because we're at the opposite extreme of everything except for being skeptical. We're both highly skeptical. So we have to make sure we don't feed each other like, oh, I expect the worst from that person. They're probably embezzling. Like, no, they're not. So don't feed that. But it was eye-opening, saying, okay, these things that you don't ever talk about. I am very high on the spontaneity side of the spectrum, and my wife is not, and that plays out as we vacation plan or talk about what are we going to do on Saturday. So, yep.
Well, I mean, with my bride, it's comical because she, when you look at some assessments, half the assessment will be fast processors and the other half are slow processors. Not a signal to any kind of intelligence, just how we process that. Fast processors can think about a dozen things, ideas at the same time. Slow processors are very deep thinkers, and they think about one or two things very, very hard. So when they speak, it's because they've given it a lot of thought. My wife is a slow processor. I tend to be a lot faster. So I'll hit her with 4 questions, and she'll just look at me and go, which one do you want answered? All of them? You get one, and we'll start there. So knowing that, and knowing she doesn't like to be surprised with a lot of questions or an awkward moment, I have learned to approach her in a much more effective and loving way. Because that's really what it's about. Yeah. I want to treat her, when we talk about the golden rule, love others as you would like to be loved. And it's just like the real depth of that analogy. If I know you and care about you and want to help you become better, I'm going to approach you how you like to be approached. Mm-hmm. I've got a fellow coworker who is on the opposite spectrum that I am. And if I approached him how I like to be approached, all I'm going to succeed in doing is irritating him. He's a very, I'm a driven, results-oriented person. He is a driven, relationally oriented person. And I typically hit him with the bottom line up front. And he's just like, hi, how you doing? And I'm just like, I don't want to know how you're doing. I just want the result. So,
But Chris does care. He's a big teddy bear, has a big heart.
Oh, I've been known to be the huggable cactus. It's quite comical. Once people get into that inner circle, they understand how dedicated that I am and how loyal I am to people. Mm-hmm. It's just that it's challenging when you're results oriented to do that. Just like it's challenging to see somebody seeking results for all the right reasons if they're people-oriented.
Mm-hmm. Now let's jump into some of the bonus questions that we had if we have time. So probably we can tackle maybe 2 of these. So, Chris, what is a misconception civilians have about SEAL teams or the military in general?
I think one of the strangest things I used to hear is, I thought you'd be bigger. It's just the average guy going through the program to get into the SEALs isn't who you think would make it. All the people that
not your Schwarzenegger kind of.
Yeah, it's just they're usually the first ones to quit and ring out. And it's just interesting. It's not the dog in the fight, but the fight in the dog. And it's just it's in the heart. And typically your average kind of guy makes it through because he's all heart and willing to do what it takes to get it done. So it's really interesting to see it from that perspective. It's just, we've got people that are called the Smurf crew. They're guys that are like 5'2", 5'3". You went 5'2", 5'3". Seriously? I thought SEALs were bigger than that. They come in all shapes and sizes, and it's all in the heart. I used to watch a pudgy guy in my buds class win all the runs. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, how in the world can you do that? You're overweight. He was all heart. And literally, he would just run like the wind. Me, I'm struggling running in that powdered sand out there. It just kicked my butt. But, it's just that dynamic.
All right. So who is someone that taught you blank whatever you want to reference, and let's take this opportunity to thank them by name. So who is someone that taught you something impactful or meaningful in your life, and let's thank them by name, comma, if they would not be offended or too embarrassed by hearing their name.
I don't know. There's a lot of positives and negatives in that I could get in trouble with that one on.
If you need to pick a safe one, that's fine.
Well, I think there's two that I would like to throw out there. One is my dad, who was in the military. Growing up, I didn't know him real well because he was always deployed. He was a SEAL as well. And so that was a struggle. But what he instilled in me, just the character component of treating other people how you want to be treated, was pretty key. Your character is yours to lose. You earn it daily. I think those were some pretty significant attributes that he gave me. When I was going to Bud's, I was really angry with him, and because I didn't think he was giving up the secret sauce. And he's just like, look, I can take you out back and make you do push-ups in the mud puddle till the cows come home. And he's just like, I raised you to do that. You do that all the time. That's no big deal. I was like, you're going to have to go out there and figure out if it's what you want to do. And if it's I can only hope that I've raised you in a way that you have that fire in your gut and your heart to make it through the program, but that's going to be on you. And that was a good talk to get from him in that process. So yeah, I'd say my dad was somebody that has really instilled something in me that's pretty good.
Okay. Tell me about your best boss. What did they do or not do that helped you thrive?
That was probably Wysotsky at the Center for SEAL in Suroviec. He actually displayed servant leadership, even at a level in the military that was highly political. And when I asked him, I was like, 2 words that you would give for leadership. What 2 key words would you use? And he said, available and approachable. You've got to be approachable. People have to know they can approach you. And you have to take the intentionality of being available so they can. When you're available and approachable, your people will bring you things a lot sooner than normally and give you the opportunity to step in and help them soar. So that was pretty powerful language. I actually remember like the top or the bottom 6 more than I do my best leaders. It's like, oh God, these 6 people I can name off from 28 years in the military. There's a lot of bosses I have a hard time remembering names, but there's 6 that I'm like, yeah, I don't ever want to be like those guys. That's the worst boss possible.
Without mentioning any of them by name, since you reference it, what was one thing that those worst boss, was there anything they had in common, or was there anything that just sticks out that you would tell other folks, avoid this like the plague?
I think it was just a level of self-centeredness. They were just so self-centered and worried about their own agenda that they weren't worried about others. And not realizing that if they were to actually put themselves out there and serve others, their agenda would be taken care of. It was when you feel like you're a rented mule, you're doing the exact minimum or the absolute minimum. You're not seeking to do more. But if your boss is willing to put it on the line for you and back your play and take responsibility for some of your mistakes, you're willing to go to bat and do so much more for that individual. And those 6, the common denominator is they were very self-driven, all about themselves.
It's time to close it out. If people wanted to contact you, how would they do that? Do you have a social media presence or?
Yeah, they can seek me out on Facebook or LinkedIn.
Okay.
They can search me, just Dr. Chris Auger. I'm out there. I'm on Twitter as well, Chris Auger 155. They can just reach out and connect with me there.
Okay. Final thoughts on self-awareness. I know we barely scratched the surface. We could be talking about this for hours, but final thoughts on that topic or anything that we've chatted about today.
I think you got to look at, even the idea of self-care. It's a journey, not a destination. So is self-awareness. So is leadership. You can't ever arrive. There's always a new level to strive for. I think somebody recently put it to me as there's the mountain in front of you, but there's the mountain range beyond that. There are always new mountains to climb. And when you think of it as a journey, and not, okay, I did that, I'm good. Okay, I'm self-aware. Maybe today you are. It doesn't sound like it. I mean, it's a journey.
Goes back to the I'm really humble one.
Bingo. So I think, when we look at it that way, it's a journey, not a destination. We're going to stumble. That's okay, as long as we're learning from the stumbles. I mean, if you keep repeating the same mistake, well, that's a different topic and a different discussion. But I think just looking at it as a journey and how can I live it to the fullest. I want to screeching tires, burnt out, nothing left on the table, saying, wow, what a ride. What's next, Lord? I mean, that's kind of, I don't want to leave anything on the table, and I want to live it. I want to live every drop I can.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. Very excited to have you on today. Love what you're doing. Love how you are helping folks. And once again, thank you for your service. My guest has been Dr. Chris Auger. And we're done. Let's hear some music. Life is way too short for work to suck. So if you want help to build your team, train your team, or manage your team, we're here. Come see us at workplaysolutions.com. Thanks for listening to the podcast.